Now for that, we need a basic website where we can use JavaScript. And I'm using a website here, and I'm not running JavaScript on the server, as I also mentioned in the first course module, because I find it more interesting to learn JavaScript if you can see something visual on the screen. And a website is something visual, which is why we'll use that. Now for that, for this basic website, attached you'll find a starting project, a starting code, which you should download and extract and then pull into a folder which you then open with your favorite IDE or code editor. In my case, I'm using Visual Studio Code, which is the tool I explained in the first course module, set up as explained there. So I'm just using that setup and the tool I explained in the first course module. So open the extracted attachment with that tool here by going to File, Open, and you should then find a folder structure that looks like this. Now, one important note, the .VS Code folder might not be there in your setup. This is just a folder created by my IDE, by Visual Studio Code, to manage some settings. In this case, the zoom level, which I set so that you can clearly see all the code I write. So that's not something you have typically. And git ignore, I have this because I'm also working with Git, which is a source control management system. And you don't need to use that. You don't even need to know what that is to follow along. It has nothing to do with JavaScript. After this lecture, you find a basic introduction to it, but you can also skip this for now and come back to it later. It's not required, not directly related to JavaScript. So what you should have in here is this index.html file with a basic HTML skeleton, nothing too fancy in there. I'm pulling in some fonts, linking to the style sheet, which you find in the assets folder in the style subfolder. And then we have this basic skeleton down there. And in the script section, you find one starting script. You can look into it and there's a bunch of code which probably won't tell you much, which I provide to you because this script actually includes some features which we don't really know yet, which we also won't fully understand by the end of this module, which is why I provided instead of writing it together with you, but which we'll of course be able to understand later in the course. But we need that to get something out on the screen and see something on the screen and not just have a boring application where nothing changes. Hence, I provide this to you. For the moment, you can just ignore this, take it for granted, and this will all make sense a bit more by the end of this module, and ultimately way more later down into the course. But of course, we'll learn more than just that. This is just some starting script which we need. So that's what we got. Now you can double click that file here, not in the IDE though, but instead in your normal Windows Explorer or Mac Finder. So there, simply double click that index.html file, and it will open up a brand new window in the browser, which should actually yield this interface. Now, this is a basic calculator, which will work a bit different than most calculators you're used to, but nonetheless, which we'll work on throughout this module. Now, for the moment, you can type and hit what enter you want. Nothing happens here because we'll write this logic together. And by writing this logic, or whilst writing it, we'll dive into the basic JavaScript features. So that is what we'll build, this calculator here. And now to build it, let's start writing some JavaScript code, because we need some logic that runs here with that page being loaded in the background, so to say, to interact when the user presses one of the buttons and to update the result, which we see down there and so on. And that's what we need JavaScript for, because with just HTML and CSS, we can't add this in the browser dynamic logic. As you learned in the first course module, you need JavaScript for dynamic features or for dynamic actions like this. And that's exactly what we'll dive into in this module, therefore.